All right, well, we won't dawdle much because these are some short sessions. Yes, tiring. And so without further ado, I will let the presenters introduce themselves, but you are here in Flipgrid, how to navigate, integrate, and captivate. I'll give Alyssa and Marlene, I'll give you some kind of hand signals when we're getting close to the end, just so that we stay on time, and let's get going.
Okay, welcome to our session. I'll kick us off here. Make sure everything will move. So I'm Alyssa Reidhead. I'm a professional practice instructor in nutrition, dietetics, and food sciences. And Marlene is also here. Marlene Graf is a professional practice associate professor in also NDFS. So you'll be hearing from both of us today, but I'll start. So the purpose of our presentation is just to focus on a variety of ways to utilize Flipgrid, really enhance student engagement and establish a learning community. So today you should learn how to navigate Flipgrid, how to integrate it with Canvas, and then finally how to captivate your students' attention. And we will be sharing some feedback about student research we did in our classes. Just an outline of what we'll look at today. We're going to look at why we choose to use Flipgrid, some ideas for you to use it in your classroom, and then finally our results from our students' research, and then some resources. We'll start with why Flipgrid. If you are unfamiliar with what Flipgrid is, it is a free and simple video discussion platform from Microsoft that really just helps educators see and hear from every student in the class. You can post discussion prompts and then students can respond with videos. There's also text, reply features, and some fun other generational friendly things like emojis and things like that within Flipgrid. Both Marlene and I have created some additional standalone videos since these sessions are really short. If you're interested in diving deeper into Flipgrid, I have created a video about integrating it with Canvas, and then Marlene has created a video about using small group discussions within Flipgrid. So kind of touch, but those links can be found in our resource infographic that will be provided on the platform. So what does the research say about online learning environments, and how does Flipgrid fit in there? So we know, and it's been well established, that online learning environments can be fairly isolating due to the lack of social presence. But more recently, BISU in 2020 found that allowing students to interact face-to-face, even in a virtual setting, can really enhance their sense of community. And then tying it all back to Flipgrid, student-produced videos can also improve engagement and learning in an online course. That's kind of how Flipgrid fits with the research. A quick course snapshot. I'll go ahead and give mine, and then Marlene will look at her classes. So I teach 2 different undergraduate courses. The enrollment ranges from 20 to 40 students per course. In fall 2020 and fall 2021, I ran those as blended courses with 1 day in person and 1 day online. Those are undergraduate students, as I mentioned. And then I also am on the instructional support team for the Master in Dietetics Administration, which is a fully online graduate course. So those are the 2 different kind of areas that I have used Flipgrid in. And I'll let you go ahead and introduce Marlene.
Yeah, so I teach a few courses, but so far I've only used Flipgrid in 2 of them, and I'm fairly new to Flipgrid, and so I've only used it in the last year or since spring. So the classes that I piloted were both large enrollment courses, and so they had at least 80 students, and one was a life cycle nutrition course, so 2,000 level class, and we met weekly via Zoom, and then otherwise it was asynchronous and online. And then I did a summer course that was an entry-level course for nutrition, and that one was fully online and asynchronous, and 7 weeks. So hopefully that context will kind of help you better understand why we chose the assignments that we did.
Okay, so why do we use Flipgrid? My mom is an educator in K through 12 and actually introduced me to Flipgrid initially, kind of at the start of COVID. And I came into my position mid-year, and students take 2 different classes, but it's the same students. And so the previous professor knew the students, but me coming in mid-year really needed to learn students' names and see their personality before the semester started, since we would be diving into content fairly early. And then I am a proponent of new technology tools. I think in each of these students' careers, they'll be using new technology. And so teaching them how to use new tech tools is kind of an objective of mine. And it includes generational friendly things. Like I kind of talked about emojis and stickers, and you can put photos, and they have different watch speeds that I really liked as well.
And for me, I've always liked being able to give students the option of making videos. But one thing I was finding is that I was trying to create instructions for all types of different video platforms or formats. Like I was trying to give them instructions for Kaltura and Loom and on their phone, and how to upload using how to upload that to Canvas. And so like I wanted to just simplify that a little bit and wanted a consistent video recording tool that was already embedded within Canvas, or that could be embedded. And then also I'd heard that Flipgrid was user-friendly, and that it was pretty easy for students to figure out, and I also liked that it had settings that I could manage. So for example, I could lock down the time on videos so that they were 5 minutes or less instead of, several minutes long, because videos take longer to grade. And then also I like the idea of students being able to view and respond to their classmates. Plus I loved that it was free to students, it was mobile friendly, and that they didn't have to sign up for a student account. They could just access Flipgrid either through Canvas or through a link that went to a Flipgrid website.
So we have some ideas to give you, and I think Marlene's gonna kick.
Yeah, so we'll just start out by saying that there's a lot of ideas out there online, and if you just Google Flipgrid ways to incorporate into higher education or into a classroom, there's a lot that come up. We'll include some links to resources at the end of our PowerPoint also. So here's an example of one website that gives you 50+ ideas on ways that you can incorporate Flipgrid into an educational setting. You can go to the next one, Alyssa. So each of us will share 2 ideas of the way that we implemented Flipgrid in our own class, and then you can adapt as needed. But for me, one thing that I wanted to try was what I call a value affirmation activity. And so this idea came from the book called Distracted by James Lang. And I read that last semester. In fact, Karin was the director of our learning circle where we read that book. And so in one of his chapters, he talks about how when students identify with a set of values and connect that with a classroom experience, and it helps motivate them to persist and learn more. And basically the message that you're trying to send is that you belong here and you can do this. And I actually stole that line from Harrison Kleiner in one of his quad side presentations. And so that was the message that I wanted to send to my students. I wanted to know that, yes, being online is hard, being in the middle of a pandemic is hard, and yet like you still have things to contribute and offer, and strengths to add in this class. And so here's a screenshot of what the assignment instructions were. And basically I gave them 4 questions that were kind of higher level types of questions on, like dig a little deeper and tell me some things about yourself. And so your video needed to be at least 2 minutes long. And if you only got to one question, that was okay. But if you wanted to respond to all 4 questions or more than one, that was fine as long as your video was under 5 minutes. And so you can go to the next slide, Alyssa. So I'll share the results from students later on, but that turned out pretty good for the most part. And then another I tried was what I called a how I apply video. And then in this particular class, they also had the option to submit a video using a platform other than Flipgrid. But the purpose was to do some sort of end of the unit or end of the semester reflection. And so once again, here's a screenshot of what the instructions were. Their video needed to be 2 to 5 minutes and focus on 3 specific principles from our class that they had implemented and applied in their own life. And then they could either do a talking head video or they could do a video that, you know, showed a PowerPoint presentation or pictures or something so that I could see how they had implemented our course into their own life. Okay, you can go to yours, Alyssa.
Okay, so my first idea I want to share with you is personal introductions. I've done this both in the MDA, which is the online graduate program, and in my undergrad classes. The picture that I have here is from the MDA, and we kind of evolved this. So initially we used to do the MDA orientation online and students would introduce themselves, and they got long-winded and it ended up being really long. And so we moved to them recording and uploading a video to Canvas, which then I would download and re-upload to like a separate page so they could watch, which is essentially what Flipgrid does. So when Flipgrid came out, I convinced Martha to go ahead and go with this idea. And so we had students record a video, and then an important piece to this introduction is that they talk about a picture representing themselves. And so we had them use the effects tool to place the picture on their video, and then they would do their introduction. And then the other way that I've used this is with my undergrad class. I had them do a pre-semester recording so that I could get to know them and their names before the first day of class. And then my second idea is that I use this to have students share their strengths. So I used career services to do the Clifton Strengths Finder. And with COVID, career services was only doing online presentations. And one thing that I felt like they missed out on was actually going around the classroom and getting to talk to other people about their strengths. And so I went ahead and used Flipgrid to have them record a video talking about their strengths. And the purpose was just to kind of get to know each other a little better and see their strengths in each other. So this was a complementary activity to the online synchronous class that career services held. And I liked that they had a little bit more time to reflect on those strengths and then record a video using or reflecting on that. So you can see the picture I have is one of my students, their initial video, and I actually responded with a text comment here, and then another student responded with a video comment. So that's kind of one of the features of Canvas or of Flipgrid. I often record things late at night because I have kiddos, and so sometimes I don't like to record videos late at night in my pajamas. So I do text comments. And I did ask Katie if I could share this quick 15-second video with you of her response.
Alyssa, we can't hear her.
Oh, darn it. I don't even know.
When you hit the, you might have to stop. Oh, did you get it?
No, maybe if I stop sharing, then it will.
And then start it over and click the, there's like
yeah.
a advance.
I did do that. So let me see one more time. If not, it's okay. No, still not. Okay, it's okay. It just kind of shows her personality, which is an objective that I had with using Flipgrid to allow students to really show them their true selves in a video rather than a text discussion. Oops. No, it's not letting me go on. So let me see if I can fix this. Okay. So our results of some in-class evaluation that we did. So I'll kind of talk about mine first. Just a little snapshot. I have had 21 students in this particular class, and I did have 100% completion rate of my survey. To keep in mind, these are junior level students in a professional program. So they are kind of high level students. And this was using that share your strengths idea that I gave you. So it replaced that traditional class activity due to COVID. And so here's the Qualtrics kind of data. You can see the question I asked was just to rate their overall experience with Flipgrid. 1 being that they didn't enjoy the activity and it didn't make them feel connected, and 10 being that they really enjoyed the activity and it really made them feel connected. And I used these boxes here to just kind of summarize the data. That 57% really liked the activity, 29 thought it was okay, 29%, and then 14% really were not fans of the activity. I feel like overall that was a pretty good result. And finally, I asked them how many Flipgrid activities they thought were appropriate per semester. And that average surprised me at like 2.8. So right around 3 here was our biggest number. And I only did 1 activity that particular semester. So I was impressed that they would have liked a few more. My qualitative data, their favorite part of using Flipgrid was for interaction and engagement. They liked that it connected them to their peers, liked hearing from everyone. And I was really surprised that they mentioned that it improved their oral presentation skills, which was not an objective that I was trying to accomplish. So that was kind of neat. And their least favorite part, like every technology tool, you're going to get some negative feedback. So it was time consuming for them. Kind of as we've been talking about throughout the conference, students are perfectionists, so they re-record videos a lot. And I try to, when I record example videos, and you'll see this on my sample grid, if it's a minor error, I don't re-record, because I want them to also feel like they don't have to re-record for a minor error. And they don't like recording themselves all the time, and don't feel like it's a substitute for in-person conversation. And the other thing was they only looked at the grid once. So they only watched the videos that were on there when they looked. They didn't go back and look at the grid. So my suggestions are to keep your videos short. If you want students to watch other students' videos, they need to be fairly short, or else it's very time consuming. Break your students into smaller groups so they have fewer videos to watch. Provide a demo, whether that's in class or you recording a demo video on Flipgrid. And then make sure you test it out before you assign it to students. There are some glitches that you'll run into. So I try to test that with their colleagues or even just my family so that I can get a sense of how it will function. And just to summarize, the pros, it encourages connection, and it's a tool to get to know others, and it's a new technology, but there are some tech issues. It can be time consuming, especially if you get into re-recording. And students don't always like to be on video. So you have those students that don't like kind of an activity.
So for me, the Flipgrid video assignment was on a list of some other participation options. And in this particular course, these were sophomore and junior level students. And the course that they were taking was required for their major. And so they were actually really good about getting work done. But the Flipgrid video option was placed kind of towards the end of the semester. And so the completion rate, meaning the number of students who actually did that assignment, was a little bit lower, quite a bit lower actually, than some of the other things on that list. And it may have been just because of where Flipgrid was placed in the semester. But let's see, you can go to the next one, Alyssa. I did do an end of semester evaluation, and 100% of my students responded. And on that evaluation, then I asked them to rate 10 different things that we'd used in our course that year. And I wanted them to rate how engaging they were, whether or not they were engaging or whether or not they were effective, meaning that they learned something and that there was value in it. So if you go to the next one, Alyssa. So this shows you kind of how those top 8 ranked. And so our synchronous Zoom sessions every week were actually their favorite theme. And sometimes they were just our class and sometimes they included a guest presenter. But that was what they appreciated the most. And then our Flipgrid videos ranked number 8 out of the 10 things that I had on there. And so 60% of them still felt that Flipgrid videos were engaging and effective. So I don't think it was, you know, a complete fail. And I probably will still continue to use Flipgrid videos in the future. But I think another confounding factor is that this was my first semester using Flipgrid. And so I had my own learning curve to figure some things out. And so that may have contributed as well. But anyway, if you go to the next slide, then I did ask a question about Flipgrid specifically. And I explained that I was trying to explain my why for having them do a Flipgrid video and saying that research demonstrates that students who feel connected and part of a group are more likely to do well in a course. And so the purpose of Flipgrid was to build community and better connection. And so I asked them to, you know, respond to that and if that really did happen. And so if you go to the next one, and of course I got a range of responses. And once again, this was a class of 80 plus students. And I would say that about 30% of them, you know, had positive feedback and appreciated the assignment and felt that it met the objective of connecting as a class. About 30% felt otherwise and were on the other end of the spectrum. And then about 40% were in the middle. And so we'll post our slides afterwards. In fact, I think they're already on our presentation, our presenter page on the ETE website. And so you can read these a little bit more closely. But one thing that was surprising to me is that there was definitely a subset of students who felt like since our course was mostly online, that there was no reason for students to connect, or that was not really something that was important. And anyway, I personally disagree, but I feel like I probably should address that a little bit more in the beginning of the semester next time and share more literature about that. Another thing that came out, and I think it's on this slide, is that they felt like the breakout rooms via Zoom in real time were a better way to connect than watching Flipgrid videos. And so we had already been doing that on a weekly basis from the beginning of the semester. And so I felt like their feedback demonstrated that that was something that was more meaningful to them. Okay, go ahead and advance to the next one. So pros, I mentioned some of these already. It's free. Students don't have to have a password and an account to use Flipgrid. The other thing is that it does integrate into Canvas, and so you can use SpeedGrader. That gets a little tricky if you're dividing students into groups, because my experience was that they couldn't comment on each other's videos if they were divided into groups if I was integrating Flipgrid into Canvas. If I sent them out to the Flipgrid website, then that wasn't a problem and they were able to comment. So it did require some extra troubleshooting for me just because I was new to Flipgrid and learning some things. So Alyssa was kind of my go-to person when I had questions. And then the teacher view on Flipgrid is different than the student view. And so sometimes it was hard for me to help students troubleshoot from their end. But I think that was my last slide in this section.
Okay, so I think this is, I can't remember who was taking which slide, but here we go. So here's our resources. They are linked here. Like Marlene mentioned, these are on our presenter page. We did have a sample grid, so that is also linked on our infographic. And here's just kind of that quick snapshot of what our infographic looks like. So there's links, there's the links to the videos from us and our sample grid. So you can dive into that if you're interested in learning more. And I think we left 5-ish minutes for questions.
I have a question. So whenever I think, oh, sorry, Elena. Whenever I think about videos, I always get into a conundrum in terms of accessibility with captions and whether or not to have students put captions, which I think is useful. So what I'm completely unfamiliar with Flipgrid. Is there an auto captioning feature? Is there a way to add captions to your videos on Flipgrid, or like what's the captioning situation there?
Marlene, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's an auto captioning thing on there already, right? So.
Yeah, and I think that's been recently added. I noticed from spring semester to summer semester, they changed some things. And for example, now you need to add students either names or email addresses for them to access a Flipgrid assignment, where it used to be open to anyone. So they've done better with privacy, I think, but yeah, captioning is also an option on there now.
Sounds to me like using Flipgrid is just a really great way to reduce instructor chaos or whatever if you're dealing with different platforms, different uploads, different integrations, different devices. This is just one size fits most in some way or another. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's how I felt. It's reduced a lot of confusion in the ways that I've used it, and it integrates with Canvas pretty easy. You can put it on your navigation, which I talk about in my standalone video. So yeah, I really liked it. I've used it several times.
Yeah, and that was one of my reasons for trying out Flipgrid as well, is because it just helped simplify things. And so, like, for example, if you're using a discussion board and having students upload videos to a discussion board, like, there's so many different ways to upload different video files and, you know, links or Kaltur or whatever. And so, yeah, it just kind of, it became pretty overwhelming for me to have so many different sets of instructions for how to do different types of video formats. And so that's why I simplified.
Christine, did you have a comment or a question before we? I think she might.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, sure. I just had seen you on mute. All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap up. And you mentioned that your resources are already, that's on the ETE page, not on the Mighty Networks page.
You can add them to both. Yeah. We'll add them
yeah, or just like drop the link in Mighty Networks. I mean, no need to do a bunch of extra work. And there we go. So thank you so much, Alyssa and Marlene, for leading us, and we'll continue on. We've got another 15 minutes before the next session start, and there we go. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.